Today is the 1st of March 2026. Welcome back to Wartime Cafe's special coverage of the war on Iran. This is our second episode. With us today is a returning guest, Dr. Jamal Wakim, a professor of political science and international relations at the Lebanese University. Thank you for coming with us. But before we start with this, Dr. Jamal, of course, we send our condolences to the Iranian people, to all Muslim peoples, and all liberty and sovereignty seeking peoples on this planet about the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei, who was declared to have been martyred in an attack on his residence in Tehran, along with his daughter, his son-in-law, and his grandchild. The vengeance that will come from the free peoples in the world and Iran, inshallah, would quench our anger at this assassination. So maybe we start with that, Dr. Jamal. This assassination, what does it mean to Iran and to its resistance to the American and Israeli attack?
Well, first, thank you for having me again on the show. And I would like to express my condolences for the Iranian people for the martyrdom of Imam Khamenei, and alongside some members of his family, and the other martyrs, especially the ones that were killed in a massacre, in a Zionist attack on schools. These were kids, mainly, let's say, girls, minor girls, who were going to their classes when the attack occurred, and there are more than 100 victims of this massacre. Actually, this is not the first massacre that the Zionists commit throughout their history. Especially in the Arab and Islamic world, they were responsible for tens of thousands of people, and maybe hundreds of thousands of people that were massacred by the Zionists. We should not forget what's going on in Gaza. And of course, we shouldn't forget about the previous crimes in Lebanon and Palestine and elsewhere by the Zionists and also by the American imperialists. So I believe that the Americans, or let's say, just to make the difference between the establishment and the American people, or let's say half of the American people.
Well, it's
not those who voted
it's
for
now
Trump.
more like the Zionist empire, the
So,
Epstein class.
I don't know what type of rationale drives them, because regardless if you believe or not believe in the Shiite faith, in the Wali al-Faqih, but Imam Khamenei, for let's say millions of Shiites all over the world, he isn't only a political figure, or wasn't only a political figure, but he's a religious figure, equivalent to the Pope for the Catholics. So how did it cross the imagination of the Zionists, but mainly of Donald Trump, that such an act wouldn't unleash dynamics that would go beyond the current confrontation between the United States and Israel on one side and Iran on the other side? I don't know what type of rationale drives these people. Of course, this was something that was expected. After all, Imam Khamenei was 86 years old. So the issue of him, let's say, passing out of the scene has been discussed for too long, especially that he was sick actually. And of course it seems that he was making preparations prior to this attack for his succession maybe, and for Imam Khamenei and for those who believe in this path. Martyrdom is not a loss but a blessing. It's a victory. And this is something that wouldn't cross the mind of or something that someone like Donald Trump and all of the people in the establishment in the United States, they wouldn't understand it, okay? Especially if we go back to the history of the Shiites, and especially during Ramadan, okay? Because it was during Ramadan that Imam Ali was martyred. And thereafter, all signs could draw resemblance between, let's say, Imam Khamenei on one side being confronted by Donald Trump on the other side. In Shiite tradition, there are a lot of similarities between and it was evoked actually, between Imam al-Hussein and Yazid, okay? Of course,
the usurper emperor that is a tyrant.
He was the son of Muawiyah who succeeded him. Some people, if you go back in history, some people would talk about urban planning during the days of Yazid, the short term of Yazid, etc. Maybe, I don't know. But Yazid has been remembered for being a corrupt, drunken man.
He was very sexually also perverse.
Etc. And now, versus Imam Hussein, who at his time represented the ultimate virtue, okay? So now, with all the scandals that are surrounding, for example, Donald Trump, the Epstein files, etc., this, in the minds of the Shiites, would put him at an equal standing with Yazid. That's why they were calling him Yazid al-Asr, the Yazid of his time, okay? Versus Imam Khamenei, who is, according to the Shiites, he's the descendant of Imam al-Hussein. And this explains the black turban that he wears, okay? So, I'm explaining this from, to a certain extent, I'm secular, okay? Yeah. But for someone who is a leader of a superpower, he should have at least had advisors who would give him insight into the various dimensions of the conflict in order not to unleash dynamics that would be beyond control. It would be beyond the control of.
So let's talk about those dynamics that could be out of control, but on the same time, someone would argue that this satanic, pedophile, cannibalistic a class that is right now ruling the West, so that includes the Zionist colony, when they are doing such a thing as assassinating Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah or assassinating Ayatollah Khamenei, they are actually calculating it as a win for their Satan God. You know,
Yeah.
somebody would say that. But in a way, let's now discuss what is possible outcomes that are uncontrollable of this assassination.
Well, I'm not that virtuous myself. Okay, I'm in the sense that maybe there are a lot of practices that I don't do. I'm secular, okay? But when you go back in history, there are signs. Usually, the collapse of a certain regime comes in parallel or coincides with the news of scandals, of inhuman practices, exaggerated crimes, so on and so forth. So let's not compare it to Imam al-Hussein or some other religious, let's say, figures. If we go back to the history of the Roman Empire, okay, the collapse of the Julian Augustan dynasty, the rule of this dynasty, coincided actually with the scandals committed by Claudius, by Tiberius. Sorry, we start with I think with Tiberius, then with Caligula, and then Nero. Okay, who committed all, let's say, sins. So that was a sign for their downfall later on. Okay. So now, when, of course, the elite in the United States and even elsewhere around the world is not a bunch of saints, and there have always been scandals, misconduct, misbehavior, let's say abuse of power, sexual harassment, all these. But when they become so blunt and so excessive, this means that it's a sign for the downfall of the dynasty or of the state, okay? Regardless of the foes that would be countering this dynasty or this state. And usually, this comes as a sign of an inner weakness and cracks in the solidarity within the elite, okay, that would eventually lead to the collapse of this imperialist or empire or imperialist superpower, etc. So, in the case of the United States, we know very well that the Epstein files, etc., are mere signs for the decadence and the crisis that is hitting the ruling elite, because it's involving the majority of the political, cultural, artistic, and economic elite, even scientific.
Yeah, we saw it. It was surprising to see some of those names.
So it's like a network that was exposed all of a sudden, okay? But this coincides with a structural problem that is hitting the US economy, which lost its edge. And this explains the hostility and let's say,
extreme violence.
The extreme, let's say, bluntness with which the president, now it's Donald Trump, who is maybe, let's say, more honest than previous ones in his conduct, let's say, in expressing his need to take over oil, to take over Greenland, let's say, control the Middle East, because, and he expressed it honestly, let's say, or bluntly, that he's doing this in order to prevent China from emerging as an economic superpower. because we know very well that China's economy is achieving major successes, and it has been able to do this without being a colonial power. Okay, something unprecedented in
we've a little bit strayed a little bit away, but because the depravities of this Epstein class is very distracting, and we have to definitely talk about the consequences of this war on China and its battle with the United States over dominance in the markets. But let's go back to, what does this assassination of the Ayatollah mean to the unpredictability of the battle? What does this offer us in the next few days and weeks?
First, I believe that it didn't affect much the political structure, and we see that there is solidarity within the Iranian regime. It's still controlling the ground, let's say, at least inside Iran. And at the same time, it has been able to retaliate right after the aggression started. If we compare it to the previous aggression that happened in June 2025, after assassinating the top leaders, commanders, etc., it took Iran around 12 hours to start to retaliate. At the time, the Americans and the Israelis expected that this would have crippled Iran, and any retaliation would have needed at least 3 to 4 days to occur, okay? But in June, they were able to replace all deceased commanders and start their shelling of Israel 12 hours later, okay? This time, they started their reaction,
minutes.
It was within 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So this means that they were prepared for such an incident or eventuality, okay? And at the same time, we see that there was a smooth transition of power according to the Iranian constitution. Meanwhile, the Iranians are escalating their retaliation. They meant it when they said before that if they get subjected to a new aggression, they would target all military bases, US military bases throughout the region. It seems that Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu counted on crippling the regime with the assassination of Imam Khamenei. This didn't happen. After 48 hours, we see that Iran has been very meticulous in choosing its targets, and at the same time in escalating in a gradual way in order to tighten the screws on the Americans. The Americans, according to the news that is reaching us, have been trying through an Italian channel and another channel maybe,
the Omani, probably.
The Omani, to propose a ceasefire. Both, I think, mainly through the Italians, this was rejected. Now, according to some American experts, they were surprised at the preciseness of the missiles or the shelling by the Iranians of US targets throughout the region. And the more or with time, the more Iran resists, the better chances it would get to fail the objectives of the aggression and impose its will.
So, you still didn't answer the question. The assassination of the Ayatollah, what unpredictable things could it lead to?
I'm trying to...
Because there was some fatwas that came out from multiple religious leaders about the admissibility of revenge being taken on the hands of any Muslim on this planet without having to come back. Is this what you mean, that this could lead to things that, in the streets of London, in the streets of Washington, in the streets of...
Well, this is a possibility because according to the what they call in Arabic taklif al-shar'i, the religious duty, let's say, okay, when the supreme leader, who is the representative of the imam on earth, okay, gets assassinated, it becomes the duty of the believers, which means those who believe in this path, to take initiative without reverting to any higher authority. Another example, okay? This doesn't mean that I'm for or against. I'm just trying to describe things as they are. 40 years ago, Salman Rushdie, the famous British author, he wrote a novel in which he degraded the Prophet. So Imam Khomeini issued a fatwa. Okay, this fatwa wasn't taken, let's say, or wasn't implemented directly. There was a big, let's say, issue about it all over the world. But decades later, Salman Rushdie, it seems that he said something else, okay? And someone in New York took it on himself to, quote unquote, punish or, let's say, implement the will of God by attacking him, okay? I'm not for this act, but this happened.
Yeah, and this is you can't calculate this. You cannot defend against something like this.
Let's take it. Let's project this onto the case of assassinating the representative of Imam al-Hussein on earth, of Imam al-Mahdi, the awaited Mahdi. Okay, and see it from the angle of someone who believes in this, or maybe he would be accused by the West of being a fanatic. Okay, so what if he takes the initiative without receiving any orders, because he already have the fatwa, okay, and let's say commit a certain act of aggression or attack a certain resort or a figure or whatever. He would have, this guy wouldn't have had any contacts with Tehran. He would have acted on his own the way a Catholic, Roman Catholic, would have acted if the Pope was assassinated.
Yeah.
So maybe this would bring it a bit closer to the minds of the Eurocentrics in order to explain the graveness of what Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu committed.
Well, obviously, President Putin of Russia understood what does such an act mean and warned President Trump during the 12-day war last year not to do something as stupid as that. We heard also President Putin speak again and condemn this inhumane act, as they called it. Clearly, in my mind at least, I think the Zionist both in Washington and Tel Aviv, know exactly what they're doing. They think that they are the chosen people, that they represent God on earth, and that they are trying to crush the God of Islam and his followers and their spirit through these killings. So inshallah they will get the same medicine back to them. So let's talk about the military developments since last night, since our first episode. It seems that Iran right now has full control over the airspace, over the American bases in the ring of bases from Erbil to the United Emirates. That's kind of the first line of defense of the Americans in the region. And we're seeing these drones fly easily into the bases in Kuwait and others. Is this a correct assessment?
Well, of course.
Did these air defenses collapse in those bases?
First, we should admit the fact that the Iranians injured heavy casualties and losses. However, Iran has always been able to absorb the aggression. By the way, the United States likes to pose as the new Rome. But if we go back in history, no Roman emperor was able to triumph over the Iranians. Okay? Well, I would like to advise the president, Donald Trump, who thinks that he's a modern Roman emperor. I'd like to advise him of going back to what happened to Crassus, for example, to Valerian, okay, at the hands of Shapur, and of other emperors, Roman emperors, who thought they would achieve victory, but eventually it was Iran that sealed their fate. Okay. By the way, Crassus was competing with Julius Caesar. He envied him for his, let's say, conquests in Gaul, and wanted to do the same in the east. So he launched an attack. At the time, it was the Parthians. I think it was around 52 BC. Okay? So the Parthians, the Persian Parthians, were able to defeat the army of Crassus. They killed his son, and worse, because of his greed, they poured melted gold onto his head.
No.
Okay? So
the Iranians built a statue right after the 12-Day War and unveiled it of that scene of the Roman emperor at the feet of the Persian.
That was Valerian, and the fate of Valerian was even worse, because he was enslaved by Shapur. He was usually, let's say, paraded nude in front of foreign, let's say,
visitors,
ambassadors, etc. And Valerian used him as a stepping stone whenever he wanted to ride his horse. So that was another example. By the way, a third example, Julian the Apostate, who was killed by his own soldiers. Some say by a Persian spear, and some others say by his own soldiers, upon his attempt to conquer Persia. So if the United States considers itself as the modern Rome, let its president, who consider themselves as modern Roman emperors, let's say, benefit from the lessons of the ancient Roman
That would
emperors
require
and
them
their
to
fate.
read, and these people seem to not be reading much other than pornography.
Well, they could even benefit from this. Someone like Caligula,
yeah, that movie is.
not only the movie,
yeah.
his history, or Nero, or I think Tiberius also. Claudius was a bit, let's say, more moderate in his behavior. That's why he ruled for.
So the U.S. just now,
for a longer period.
a few hours ago, admitted that there's 3 American soldiers dead, 20 somewhat injured,
Yeah.
and that was on the attack on that hotel in Bahrain.
Okay.
You know, from those images that we've been seeing of these attacks on American bases and places where American officials and soldiers are hiding, can we expect that the number is much higher than that?
It could be. And maybe these losses, maybe the president or the administration in the United States is pressuring the military not to announce the, let's say, the real figures of the deceased, because it would backfire on Trump's status prior to the upcoming elections. Okay.
Yeah, the by-elections.
The by-elections. So, but for how long they could, let's say, hide the figures and numbers of those deceased or killed or injured, okay? Because we know very well that there are also tens or hundreds of injured Americans in various bases, okay? And hotels that were targeted by Iranian drones and missiles. After all, this is war. And of course, the Iranians are enduring sacrifices and losses, but we're talking about rugged terrain, a set of high mountains, the Zagros, the Elbrus, and other mountains. We're talking about a highland that is overlooking Mesopotamia on one hand and Central Asia on the other hand. And we're talking about Iran with its various, let's say, geopolitical dimensions. The Chinese know very well that they would be next. Maybe not in, they wouldn't be subject to a direct attack, but the Americans, if they secure their control over Iran, the next step would be to destabilize Central Asia, and then China would be subject to secessionist movements, instability in 3 main regions. First, Xinjiang in northwest China. Second, in Yunnan in southeast China. And in the middle, the Tibetan
Plateau.
Okay?
There's even the Mongolia,
Of
inner
course,
Mongolia.
there is also the, we're still in the region closest to Iran.
Yeah.
Okay? So, the Chinese, of course, the Russians, let's say, have a stake in Iranian survival. What they can do is little because they are already implicated in their duty to ward off the threat by the global West in Ukraine. So Ukraine isn't, it's not a war between Russia and Ukraine, but it's the war of the global West against Russia on Ukrainian soil. If the Americans succeed in defeating Iran, The implications would be huge for Russia because the Americans would be hitting in the soft belly of Russia in Central Asia. And worse, China would be isolated, and all its, let's say, vision for an alternative international relations based on the Road and Belt Initiative would become obsolete, because if we look at the map, all branches of this Road and Belt Initiative intersect in Iran before proceeding towards West Asia and Europe. So if the Chinese choose not to intervene, and I don't mean that this intervention should be direct, they don't have to send troops, but they should intervene the way they did during the Vietnam War. In 1950, when the People's Republic of China was established, it was boycotted and isolated by the United States and the global West. China benefited from the Vietnam War to, let's say, force the Americans into opening dialogue with it. And we remember back then, through Chinese and of course Soviet support, how the Vietnamese were able to, let's say, fight the Americans and eventually defeat them in the Vietnamese War. Something that the Americans are still remembering, trying to overcome through waging other wars. At the time, China was able to ensure its international role and its seat in the UN Council through the victory achieved by Vietnam over the Americans. Okay?
And then we had the meeting with Nixon and the opening of business relations.
Definitely.
And
now, the Americans, or Trump's, let's say, security, let's say, doctrine, gives priority to, let's say, confronting China. Of course, not in military terms, but in various means. So the Chinese have an interest in helping Iran survive the attack. Okay? Otherwise,
we're seeing those satellite images every day coming out on
I don't know.
Chinese satellite websites that are basically open for people.
I don't know, but I presume that the Chinese, if they are acting rationally, they should help Iran. Okay? If Iran survives, then the biggest winner would be China. Because as it did with Vietnam, when it assisted Vietnam in its war against the United States and was able to secure its place as one of the superpowers in the world, China now, which is trying to shape a new world order alongside Russia, would benefit from Iranian resilience, okay, to secure this leading role in the world, okay?
As we see, the West is trying to create a new world order that this...
Actually, the West is trying to defend or preserve the old order that came into existence after the Second World War.
Or are they reshaping it openly to something
Definitely,
different with this
yeah. But
rules-based?
that's why what's going on in Iran is of such a magnitude and importance that it would decide not only the fate of the Middle East, but the fate of the whole world. If Iran gets defeated, then the Americans, would secure an American 21st century.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we will see a retreat of American influence throughout the world and emergence of the awaited multi-party or multipolar order. At the level of the region, well, I'm admitting this bitter reality. They talk about an Arab nation and Islamic nation. Well, if we combine both the Arab and Islamic nation from Tanja in Morocco to Jakarta in Indonesia, the sole country that is confronting US and Zionist hegemony is Iran.
Yeah.
Okay? If Iran gets defeated, then the whole Arab Islamic world will enter into a Zionist era for the upcoming century. Otherwise, all quote-unquote achievements by Israel since 2023 in the region would get eroded gradually, and we will see a reversal of the course of events, and this would eventually lead to an internal crisis in the Zionist entity.
So we saw these waves of attacks on the first ring of bases. We saw attacks on housing units where the American soldiers or CIA or others were staying in these. And we just had an announcement a few hours ago that Iran fired 4 ballistic missiles on the USS Lincoln aircraft carrier group. How significant is this, and what does it mean that it's easier now for them to reach because there's no more defenses on their way to reach the aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea?
Well, it seems that the first wave that was launched yesterday and today, it was meant to destroy all radars and other facilities that could control and guide missiles and at the same time detect hostile missiles. And this explains why the attacks, the Iranian attacks, became more effective, hitting essential targets like in Beit Shemesh, in occupied Palestine, and in succeeding to hit, other than the bases, to hit this air carrier, Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so well, we're at the beginning of the 3rd day now, and the more the Iranians resist, the more the situation of the United States and Israel gets precarious, because they were counting on a swift and on a swift attack with clear results. Okay, in the previous attack in June, after 12 days, it was Israel that requested a ceasefire through through the Americans, and of course the Americans through other let's say mediators. So far it seems that the Iranians are being capable of launching attacks, and I believe that we might see lengthy confrontation that goes beyond American expectations of 5 to 1 week, 5 days to 1 week, to 1 week. I don't know if the Israelis and the Americans, alongside their allies, could sustain a lengthy confrontation that lasts for a few weeks. What would be the impact on global economy, on oil supplies, especially that Hormuz path was closed.
We just saw two.
On international inflation, especially in the West, and the impact on the middle and poorer classes that many of them voted for Donald Trump in his new agenda.
We saw two oil tankers being hit
Well, the
today.
more the merrier. I don't know.
Yeah. Prices of oil already
Yeah, they
pushing
have
towards 80.
jumped by $10 already. We need to see where the oil prices could reach.
How about the attacks that we heard about British bases in Cyprus? Two ballistic missiles reaching Cyprus from Iran. What does this indicate to us?
Well, too bad Cyprus have provided facilities. Well, since its independence, it provided facilities for the British, for the Americans, and lately for the Israelis. And that's why the Iranians were being very clear that they would target any base that could be used as a starting point in the US-Israeli aggression against Iran. The Cypriots have provided this for the Israelis.
The whole genocide of Gaza was kind of almost
Yeah, of course, and let's say the Israelis have used Cypriot and Greek, but mainly Cypriot airports as a safe haven for their naval fleet, for their air fleet, sorry, when the Zionist entity was attacked by the Islamic resistance, by Hamas, by the Islamic resistance, and by Iran on various occasions during the confrontation over the past 3 years.
So let's say right now we continue in the next week this war, and the US and Israel start depending more and more on their back bases in Cyprus, in Crete, Soda base of the NATO. We would see more of the Iranian weapons reaching those bases?
Well, I don't know. That depends on Iranian capabilities, but it seems that the range of Iranian missiles go beyond 2,000 kilometers. So they can reach all air bases within this ratio. Okay? And it depends on the capability of Iran to develop its defenses and continue its attacks against the Israelis. Okay.
So currently all these Zionist and American fighter jets, bombers, are firing from Syrian airspace or Jordanian airspace on Iran. They're having to refuel over the Zionist colony, but they're not landing in Jordan or Saudi anymore, where those spaces are targeted easily. So
yeah, but this would render logistical, let's say, logistics would become more complicated because the let's say the airplanes and the air fighters would need these oil supply jets to refuel and go back and forth. So this would strain the logistics of the Americans, and of course this is all money spent, and we know very well how money is important for Donald Trump, who keeps talking about billions and billions of dollars, you know. So now, instead of earning billions and billions of dollars, he would be spending billions and billions of dollars.
We saw a few of the hotels that he bought with Kushner in the Emirates targeted deliberately by Iran. So his personal pocket is being hit now.
Yeah, this is what makes him suffer most, it seems.
The bases in Turkey right now have gained much more importance in the American plan to continue this war, since the bases in Jordan, Iraq, and the Gulf are out of commission. Should we expect somehow Turkey to also receive a few punches?
Well, I believe that so far the Iranians have been trying to spare some friendly countries to a certain extent, including Turkey. But they have already warned Azerbaijan, which hosts many US and Israeli bases. And this controlled reaction by the Iranians makes us conclude that they are not in a rush. And this means that they are, let's say, sure of themselves, of what they are doing, and they are not being hasty or launching their punches left and right. Everything is counted, it seems, so far. But we need to see how things evolve over the past few days, because this is an ongoing confrontation and we cannot jump into conclusion. We need to be very delicate in assessing the course of events. But so far, I believe that the Iranians are faring well.
Well, one more military target that was hit supposedly is this joint base in the Emirates that is hosting French soldiers. No news of any fatalities there, but yesterday there was the attack that hit Italian barracks in Qatar, where 10 Italian soldiers were killed. So is Iran not caring anymore? It will attack any and every member of the Western Alliance that has presence in the region?
Well, I believe that it will be attacking any power that would get involved in the confrontation. What are the Italians doing in Qatar? Teaching Italian?
Spaghetti. Pizza making.
Well, I love the Italian people, but when you send troops, and this is addressed to the government, when you send troops to a front to fight against another power on behalf of your master, then this would be the result, the loss of lives and the, let's say, tragedy of families, whether in Iran or in the West.
From a kind of war games, analysis or setting formulas of red lines and so on, it seems like up until now, Iran has set a new formula with this confrontation with the enemy, that an attack on Iranian territory will lead to an attack on all imperialist assets and territories, controlled territories in the region. But up until now, the other line that hasn't been set yet and has been crossed by the Americans, which is that line of assassinations of leaders. Does Iran have to create an equilibrium there? Does it have to liquidate some of the leaders that the United States depends on in the region, or American leadership or representation, so this will become a red line that the West doesn't cross again?
No, I believe that, too bad, the West in general, and not only the United States, not only Donald Trump, have destroyed all bases of international law and multinational treaties, all norms that could resolve conflicts in a peaceful way. And they made it clear that the only factor that would deter them is power and force. Iran has been trying, and of course other powers, but now we're talking about Iran, in third world countries. So Iran has been trying to defend itself against continuous aggression by the global West in various means. And the West, headed by the United States and Israel, haven't been deterred, but they have been trying always new means, new ways, new tactics or strategies. So Iran doesn't have a nuclear bomb. That's why it was attacked. North Korea has nuclear bombs, and that's why in his first term, Donald Trump was willing to go and meet with the North Korean leader, the leader of Democratic Korea, Kim Jong-un, shake hands with him, let's say walk hand in hand with him. So was Trump giving hints to the Iranians that they should have a nuclear bomb so that he would be willing Allahumma la taqbal siyamahu.
Should Donald Trump
was Donald Trump giving hints to the Iranians that he would only be willing to shake hands with them, walk hand in hand with them, only if they had a nuclear bomb? The man that was preventing Iran, or issuing a fatwa preventing Iran from having a nuclear bomb, was Imam Khamenei, for religious purposes. Now, if I were in the shoes of the Iranis, who have been trying all sorts of diplomacy, all means to convince the West that they wouldn't get a nuclear bomb, yet the West was always using this as a pretext to boycott and attack Iran, not once but twice in a matter of few months. Well, I'll be very blunt. If I were in the shoes of the Iranians, I would produce the nuclear bomb and get over with it. This is the only deterrence for such an aggressive West that is subjected to Zionist will and to criminal minds that would not be deterred by any moral value.
Final question here, Dr. Jamal. We saw in the last few hours the Iraqi resistance targeting American bases inside Iraq and also in Jordan. We had a statement from the Secretary General of Hezbollah Lebanon, Sheikh Naim al-Qasim, earlier in this morning that sounded like Hezbollah is ready to somehow join a battle if need be. He didn't use those words, if need be, but in my reading, I felt that we are closer than ever to the possibility of Hezbollah in Lebanon opening a front. Do you think that is a possible something to see in the next few days?
Well, it's not, let's say, destined, okay, that Hezbollah would participate. It's a possibility, okay? So far, Iran is faring well. In last June, Hezbollah didn't participate for Lebanese considerations. Maybe if the war goes by for several months, Hezbollah, for its own considerations, might benefit from the situation in order to regain deterrence against continuous Israeli aggressions. The Israelis haven't stopped their aggression against Lebanon despite the ceasefire. Okay, so again, usually we in politics we role play. We put ourselves in the shoes of the, let's say, the player or the actor, in order to predict his future steps. So Hezbollah might benefit from a lengthy confrontation to participate at a certain point, not now, not in the next few weeks, but this could happen if the war goes on for a few months, maybe to regain its deterrence and ward off the Israeli aggressions against Lebanon.
Dr. Jamal Wakim, thank you very much for being with us on the second day of the war on Iran, and hopefully we'll see you twice a week and as long as this war continues. You are still watching Wartime Cafe on Free Palestine TV. Behind the camera is Hadi, Hotait, Rabih, Ghannam, and Ali Hayek. I'm your host, Laith Marouf. I ask you to press the subscribe button on whatever social media platform you're watching this on, and to go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate so we can continue bringing you this content. Until we see you next time, I bid you all a free Palestine and a world free of Zionism and imperialism.